As you can probably tell, this isn't any old 3DS. This isn't even a standard new 3DS XL. This console was never sold in stores and can't even play games. Only 5,000 of these particular units were made in total. In my eyes, that makes this its own form of relic that itself belongs in a museum. It doesn't have a home menu, goes to sleep when tilted, has a strap, headphone-only audio, and there's no stylus or game slot. I'm going to compare all of these quirks, both external and internal, with a standard console in a full teardown. And while we're inside, we may as well refurbish it and add a few mods and upgrades while still retaining the rare original parts before seeing what the guide has to offer. But how did these consoles even come about? If they were never released to the public, how on earth did I get my hands on one? And am I really going to mod it? In 2012, Nintendo's own Miyamoto proposed a brand new revamped audiovisual tour guide for the Louvre Art Museum in Paris, France. Iwata and Miyamoto found success in their trials of a DS guide in a Disney shopping district, a couple aquariums, a university, and an art museum in Japan. Since then, they had an ambition to one day bring the tech to the Louvre. Iwata and Miyamoto eventually decided to upgrade the system to 3DSs that have more multimedia capabilities. And of course, the 3D top screen. These original units ran a bare-bones developer test firmware that's missing almost everything compared to the retail firmware. The only thing this could do is load data from a special development cartridge that won't work on a retail console. I can imagine these cards got lost quite frequently, as well as the 32GB SD card that contains most of the tour's assets. The original units donated by Nintendo were the Cosmos Black original 3DS. The cost of a museum ticket including the 3DS guide was €6 over the standard entry price. These consoles were later replaced with metallic silver original 3DS XLs. These had no special branding on them at all, and just looked like standard retail units, minus the completely different software. The same tour guide software used on the Louvre consoles could also be purchased in the museum's gift shop and on the eShop. There was even a free download of a 3D video of the Venus de Milo sculpture on the eShop to promote it. With the retail cartridge, you could see all of the iconic artwork wherever you are, and if you did return to the museum, the GPS function works the same as the Louvre rental consoles, so you can use your own 3DS instead of renting one. Fast forward a few years until just after the release of the new 3DS XL in 2015, and the Louvre got a major refresh of their entire audiovisual guide fleet, utilizing the updated hardware. The tour guide software itself remained largely unchanged and was just updated for the new system, but the hardware got way more attention this time around. First, this actually now looks like a custom system for the Louvre. It has custom blue outer plates, Louvre and 3DS logos, and the functions for the buttons are etched onto the bottom inner shell. If you look closely, the A and B buttons are the same as those on the Japanese or PAL SNES edition, whilst the X and Y buttons are taken from the North American or NTSC-UC SNES edition. And now, the guide software runs entirely on the system and doesn't require a 3DS cartridge. It only needs the 32GB SD card, which has shrunk to microSD. But now, in place of the cartridge slot, there is a big block of plastic. I wonder if the game reader module is even there at all. Maybe we'll have to add one in and see what happens. The loudspeakers also don't work, and the camera is never used in the guide. It's possible they were omitted too, although the 3DS actually checks for the camera module on boot, and often won't start up when it's damaged or disconnected. So who knows if it's there or not? Well, we all will know very soon, because the whole 3DS tour program was retired just over a month ago, at the start of September 2025, and these units have appeared on the open market after they were given to some of the Louvre staff, so that means I've got one for us to crack open. My biggest question here is, which of the quirks and features of the Louvre Audioguide new 3DS XL are distinct hardware differences, or locked out by its completely different firmware? I also wonder if they made any changes to make the console more durable. You can see that it's certainly had a fair amount of use during its service. Most of them I've come across are in similar condition. The first thing that's immediately obvious is the strap. The original 3DS XL, 2DS and 2DS XL all have two strap holds on the front corners, whilst the new 3DS and new XL only have one on the back. But here we have them on the side with cutouts on the outer plate. This plate appears to be made from an entirely different mold, which is a contrast to the older Louvre units, which had standard retail shells. I noticed that the battery life on this unit isn't anywhere near what it should be in my testing earlier, so we're definitely replacing it with a new one, even if it doesn't look too spicy. The hinge is also a little worn and floppy, so we'll get that fixed up later too. So far the teardown is very similar to a standard console. There are 8 screws holding the back shell in place, and here we can see that the printed text is missing from the Louvre console, as this text is there to comply with various consumer regulations, thus unnecessary on a non-consumer unit. This is quite surprising. The game slot exists. So that means that they spent the cost of the game slot times 5,000 and not a single one was ever needed. Now, at first thought that seems quite silly, but it is also possible that due to their existing manufacturing processes, it may have been more costly to omit or change steps in that process rather than keeping it as is. These two small pieces that fell out are what the strap ties onto. They have slots on either side to hold them in place. These holes are completely filled in on the retail shell, and from the looks of it, this too seems to be a custom mold and distinct from the retail model. Now this is actually different. The NFC reader bracket is a completely different color. It's a very light grey, whilst the original is black. This goes against what I was saying before. I've never seen this piece in this color. So let's tear it down further and see if the NFC reader itself is different. It shouldn't be, as it isn't used in the tour guide, but we'll see. After removing the motherboard, we can see that it has no visual differences. I don't need a side-by-side for this one. And the NFC reader also seems to be unchanged. So why the different color? If we look closely, the two brackets actually have different model numbers. The standard black is F1F-2 and the grey is F2F-3. I wonder if this was replaced at some point or if they all have this. If any of you know any more about this, please share with us in the comments. By examining the screen ribbon cable, we can see if it's a higher quality IPS panel or a TN. Here there is no missing pin on the right side, so it's a standard TN. I'm going to upgrade it with this IPS screen and also replace the touchscreen with one in better condition. But what about the top screen? All of the screws and internal components have been unchanged so far, so I think we can now expect the speakers to be there, even if they don't do anything. And there they are. Now is the trickiest step of the teardown. we need to separate the top half from the bottom by pushing out the hinge mechanism and slowly slide out the 3 ribbons and antenna. The floppy hinge is caused by the hinge mechanism slowly wearing down the plastic shell. So to repair it, we need to replace this entire shell piece, which means removing all 4 cables from the hinge and swapping all of the other pieces to the new shell. It's very easy to damage the ribbons here, so it's best to be very gentle when twisting up the ribbons before sliding them softly through the ring. This, I think, explains why the audio guide doesn't use the console's camera at all. Since it is the outermost ribbon of the 3, it rubs against the metal ring and slowly eats away the protective coating, eventually breaking into the internal wires, causing the camera to no longer function. The repair costs would have been much higher if it needed constant replacement. I'm going to replace it alongside the new shell piece just to keep everything in tip-top condition. Well, look at that. The top screen is already IPS, so I don't need to upgrade it. There's a good chance that all of the Louvre consoles are the same, although I'm sure a lot of them had the top screen repaired in the almost 10-year run they were used. I was going to use this new glass screen lens, but the original lens cover is still in great condition under the screen protector. So let's get it mostly reassembled again and we can start my favorite part, the hardware mods and upgrades. I want to capture the displays when using the tour guide, so we have to install a hard mod to be able to do that. We've installed a capture card on the channel before if you've seen my ultimate 3DS build video. However, that was the optimized card. This time we are going to use Loopy's version from the US. I chose this because it is completely reversible, and the display signals are installed by plugging in these ribbon cables instead of soldering them to the board. This makes it much easier to install and also is less damaging for our rare console. However, it still involves soldering in the audio flex cable, and it also requires cutting the shell and bracket to get it to fit properly. No, I can't do it. No. Altering this rare piece is unnecessary at best. Let's use a standard one instead. The ribbon cables for the capture card simply sit in between the connection from the console to the screen, allowing it to read the display data without interrupting it. They can be a tight fit sometimes, so you must be careful not to rip it with your tweezers when pushing. After they are lined up, the board goes in flat and everything can be plugged back in. Next up, soldering. First, we need to do the audio flex for the capture card. There are a few pads here that need to be tinned up before we put the flex board down. This is just to ensure that there is enough solder to connect to the underside of the flex. Then we simply line it up and tack down each point. Add some flux and touch up the points until they are solid, round, and shiny. Remember how the loudspeakers don't work? Well, let's change that, or at least work around it. Right now this console only plays audio out of the headphone jack, and I want to play it out loud. So we're going to tap into the headphone jack and then transmit that audio signal over Bluetooth to something louder. This Bluetooth audio board is only $4 and should do the job perfectly, if we install it correctly. Thankfully, it doesn't require too many wires, and the solder points are quite big. I'll have the Bluetooth boards and some other parts I used linked below if you wanted to give it a go yourself. That being said, I'm going to make it a bit more difficult for myself to make it a little cleaner. To put the module in pairing mode, we need a button. I don't want a new button sticking out, so I'm going to use the home button on the console instead. just the solder point for it is super small and fragile, as you can see. All it takes is a slight wrong movement and BAM! Oh, no. I actually did it. One of the resistors has come off and stuck to my iron. This just increased the difficulty significantly, because now we have to get it back on without damaging the ribbon connector for the home button. So we can't use a heat gun or it will melt, and we can't touch it with the iron, or we could bridge the pins, and it's a real pain to fix that on this style of connector. But with some patience, it's back on and the wire is solid. A dab of UV resin a day keeps the technician away. Problem solved. Now we can do the cruisy part, the audio and power connections. Left, right, and ground channels for audio are around the headphone jack. And there's a 3.3 volt location next to the SD card connector. All we have to do is make wires for all 4 of these points in ground. And then we can solder them into their respective pins on the Bluetooth module. They are labeled on this module, which is great. A lot of boards simply use numbers and you have to look up what each one does. With that, we can stick it down, tidy it up, and get the console fully reassembled. We still need to install the capture card itself. We slide and clip in both screen ribbons to the card, then the audio ribbon, and we can wire up the USB-C port for charging with these 2 wires. Black is ground and white is 5 volts. Now, there's one last part. Right now the shell won't fit with the capture card there, so we have to cut the shell to allow for it. If you're a fan of the channel, you know what that means. CNC. I've got these toolpaths really dialed in for the capture card. First, it will drill some space horizontally to make room for the board, then a vertical drill for the USB-C port. And all done. And I know what you're thinking, did he really just destroy that extremely rare shell? And the answer is no. I swapped it out with a regular black shell when you weren't looking. As expected, it lines up great. I took these shell pieces from another genuine console to keep it all original on that front. And after closing it up now, we have access to both the stylus slot and the game slot. I mean, the stylus part is cool, but the game still won't play unless we modify the firmware. We could do that, there have been a few posts of others doing so, but the whole point of this console for me is that it's the Louvre edition, so I'm going to keep the software stock. But did I mess anything else up? No, it boots. Both screens are certainly IPS as they should be, and oh, what's this? The screens are turning black. Very strange. Wait, that's definitely another aspect of the Louvre software. The screens turn off to save battery life when it's not in use and hanging from the strap. Quite a thoughtful addition. The hinge now feels much better and everything else appears to be working. So, what about the mods? Upon trying to connect my Bluetooth speaker, it paired fine, but I'm not getting any sound. And then it clicked. Wait a minute. Audio is only output through the headphone jack if headphones are plugged in. Now, on a standard console, we could install custom firmware, and Luma 3DS has an option for turning this on and off. But here, I had assumed that it was set to always use headphones since the speakers are permanently turned off in software on the Louvre console. Well, now we know that isn't the case. Upon testing with a multimeter, there are 2 pins that connect to ground when the cable is plugged in. The most simple solution here is to wire both of them directly to ground to trick the system into thinking that headphones are always plugged in. On a standard console, it would be better to wire some kind of switch to turn this on and off, so you can still use the built-in speakers if you didn't want to go the software route. But that doesn't matter on this one. Now we can test it again, and success. It actually sounds decent. There's a very slight delay, but that could also be this speaker, and we can't expect absolute perfection from a $4 part. Oh, look at that. In the graphic it has a new 3DS XL, but with the strap points on the corner like an original XL. It looks like they updated the buttons on the console in the graphic, but didn't update the strap point location. Anyway, before we take a better look at the tour guide software, a console this rare deserves a solid case to contain it. I found these aluminium cases online that come in a few different sizes. You can cut out the internal foam to fit anything. So I'll make a gap for the console and the original shell pieces, and then another for the straps. I'll have these linked below if you want one for any of your consoles. Let's transport ourselves to the Louvre. The amount of content in this is genuinely staggering. The images are extremely high resolution, and you can zoom in to catch every detail. There are also 3D models that you can actually view in 3D thanks to the top screen. It definitely needs that 32 gigabytes of storage. There are even audio clips with information from many of the works. And there it is, the refurbished and upgraded Louvre Audioguide Edition new 3DS XL. I've wanted one of these ever since I saw it at the new Nintendo Museum in Kyoto, Japan. I know some may think it sacrilegious to have tampered with a rare console like this, but as I mentioned before, all of these are reversible and nothing was damaged. The new IPS bottom screen and digitizer freshen up the console, whilst the capture card lets me share some of the tour with you. In all, I think we've learned a lot from this project and come out with an awesome piece of history. And if you're into more videos like this, don't worry, I've got plenty more in the works. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss them. And hit the like button if you want to see any more DS or 3DS upgrades and modding. Let me know what you think about this build. Do you think I went too far, or does it only enhance the original console? Goodbye.